I'm going to talk today about spirituality and technology. I guess you could call me a technologist. I pioneered system software technology in the 70s, shortly after IBM unbundled its software and hardware offerings. I pioneered computer graphics technology in the early 80s, email systems under Unix in the mid-80s, full-text search and retrieval technology in the late 80s, which gave birth to Yahoo, Google, Ask Jeeves, and a long list of search engines, and then a host of software applications in the 90s. Having served the masters of technology for 30 years, I've concluded that in terms of group or planetary consciousness, explosive advances in technology tend to result in a general decline in spirituality. At least on planet Earth, spiritual advancement seems to have been inversely proportional to technological investment. I'm one of these rare people who believes that Darwin was wrong. That Darwin's theory of evolution applies very well to flora and fauna, but not to humankind. Why? Because I believe that humankind has not evolved one whit in the last 100,000 years, perhaps 1,000,000 years. We have not evolved. Yes, we live a little bit longer because of medical technology. But in spirituality, we have been in a long decline. Before the era of technology, Homo sapiens sapiens lived in a world of night and day, wind and rain. Minds functioned without electromagnetic interference, any whatsoever. Our progenitors were in tune with the earth and the animals. They had rich psychic powers and could sense minute changes in their environment. They were telepathic and could probably communicate with each other without using voice or drawings or symbols. They could sense when predators were close by, giving them time to plan to fight or take flight. Now let's look at today. Has the human race evolved in the past 100,000 years? I think not. We killed each other then, and we kill each other now. But now we have the technology to exterminate entire nations rather than just individuals and small tribes. Whereas we can record evolutionary advances and declines in the flora and fauna, it's difficult for me to see that humankind has evolved at all. So how did we get from Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens sapiens? I believe, and I'm a little weirdo, that we were created by a race of superior beings in order to mine gold for them, probably in South Africa. Possibly by the Anunnaki, whose planet, we are told by Zecharia Sitchin, is on a 36-year, highly elliptical orbit around our sun. And our creators periodically return to planet Earth to tweak our DNA a bit more. But I see no scientific evidence that the human race has evolved since its last tweak. During a conversation with a local medium, I used to be president of a spiritual church until they threw me out. But this medium told me that those who communicate with the dead are finding it increasingly more difficult to conduct that communication. Today, newcomers to mediumship find it much more challenging to build a link between our plane and the other plane. I believe, by the way, that it's the fifth dimension, that we live in 3 dimensions here. The 4th dimension is filled with energy, and that's the dimension from which the 0-point energy comes, and our sunshine and our light. And then the 5th dimension is where we go after we leave this travail. But mediumship in the United States has declined since the early 20th century, circa Madame Blavatsky and Arthur Ford. There's simply too much noise. We live in a whirlpool of electromagnetic radiation. We're awash in a sea of television and radio broadcasts, copper wire telephony, cellular telephony, pagers, wireless internet communication, electric power transmission, street lights, microwave ovens, MRIs, and heaven knows what electromagnetic emanations are being broadcast by the military establishment. Some people believe that the military is in control of the weather. And it's true that there are some 40 weather modification programs active in the United States right now. We created HAARP, a 1 billion-watt antenna array located in the wilds of Alaska. And now the military has created a number of look-alike, a number of HAARP installations on ships at sea for the ultimate in portability. Imagine the destruction of which we are now capable when we can beam a 1 billion-watt, pencil-point-thin beam of energy at the ionosphere. That's a tremendous amount of power, and it's a tremendous amount of power concentrated in a very, very thin beam, as thin as a hair. Remember a couple of decades ago when we discovered big holes in the ionosphere? And you may recall reading that in Australia, it was a law that you had to walk, when you left your house, you had to wear a hat, or you could be arrested. Why? Because we had blown a couple of holes in the ionosphere, and the sun's lethal radiation was coming straight through. So you could get a severe sunburn in Australia in 15 minutes exposure to the sun. So we punched holes in that kind of warm blanket that protects the Earth, along with the Van Allen belt. And I believe it was our military folks who punched those holes through the misuse of the HAARP technology. I also believe that the Environmental Reengineering Project, which we know as chemtrails, which tends to take a sunny day and turn it into an overcast day, was created to protect the planet from the very holes in the ionosphere that we inadvertently created. Our military science is hidden from us by national security edict, and so when they make a huge error, we experience the effects, but we have no dots to connect to determine what could have caused our environment to change and what could have caused Mother Nature to turn against us with such severity. We broke the code on splitting the atom in order to destroy tens of thousands of human beings with a single bomb. And then we applied that technology to the electric utility industry. But we have not handled our technology with much wisdom. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and now Fukushima. I'm going to digress a bit to tell a quick little story. Years ago, many, many years ago, I was a sales rep working in Philadelphia for a software company, and my boss and I drove to Harrisburg to make a sales call on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's IT department. And when we arrived, the parking lot was totally empty. I was used to parking three blocks away and taking a long walk. But today I could park right in front of the building and have any space I wished. And I couldn't. I thought, what the heck is going on here? And we talked to our 2 IT people for 15, 20 minutes, gave our little dog and pony pitch, and then departed. And we got in the car and we're driving back to Philadelphia. And we decided to stop at Howard Johnson's on the Pennsylvania Turnpike to call our respective offices and find out if there were any messages for us. And my boss was on the payphone to my right. We didn't have cell phones in those days. And I was on the payphone next to him. And we were both asking our administrative people the same question, are there any messages for me? And in my conversation, all I heard was screaming at the other end. Are you in Harrisburg? Do you know about 3 Mile Island? They're talking about a meltdown that could blow up the entire state. That's what the news was on the local news media at the time. And I said, no, don't worry about it. We left Harrisburg 15 minutes ago, so we're on the road now. Where are you? I said, beats me, we're at Howard Johnson's. Wait a minute, there's a water tower with a name on it. Let me lean out the window and take a look. And I leaned over and looked. I said, oh yeah, we're in Middletown. And she said, that's where the reactor is melting down. And so my boss and I jumped into the car. His eyes, when he got the message, were as big as saucers. And we jumped into the car, and I was driving down the Pennsylvania Turnpike at 100 miles an hour to try to get us as far away from the ensuing blast as we could get. And he was in the back seat, looking out the back window, hoping to get a look at the mushroom cloud, 3 Mile Island. Chernobyl came along decades later and made 3 Mile Island look like a walk in the park. And then Fukushima, which made Chernobyl look like a walk in the park. Why are so many ocean species dying out and mutating right now, especially off the coast of west coast of the United States? I believe that Fukushima holds the power to literally destroy the human race by methodical destruction of the ocean life and therefore interrupting the food chain on which we depend. Fukushima is still out of control, and I believe we've traveled down an energy rat hole when we split the atom. There are many alternative possible energy sources that we have not touched as yet. And I believe we chose the wrong one for a military reason, and then made the error of thinking that our electric utilities could handle that awesome power and that dangerous material on a budget. I believe that if there is a galactic federation in our Milky Way galaxy, those in charge have already decided to quarantine planet Earth, lest we carry our nuclear weapons into space and threaten other star systems and planets. Perhaps that's why every craft that has attempted to land on Mars has lost its communication. I wonder if perhaps somebody in that Galactic Federation is trying to keep us on our own planet. Now we're faced with a similar challenge. In order to conduct war with greater devastation, we descended down that rat hole. And there's some problems with the peaceful use of atomic energy. Number one, it's very dirty. Two, we're concentrating elements that in their natural form are completely harmless to people, animals, flowers, plants, and the planet. But once you concentrate them, you put them into a state in which they are no longer safe, and they are no longer safe for many thousands of years. The byproduct of nuclear energy is depleted uranium in the form of spent fuel rods, and they remain dangerous to humans for perhaps tens of thousands of years. So there's no truly safe place to store those depleted uranium rods, because no matter where you put it, whether you dig a hole in the ground and put it in a vault, or build a hole in a base of a mountain and stick it in there, it can be released by flood, war, earthquake, or some other natural disaster of which we're not cognizant right now. And lastly, owing to the economics of energy generation and transmission, electric utilities are really unwilling to spend the money necessary to control the beast of our creation. And that's why we've had 3 Mile Island, and that's why we've had Chernobyl, and that's why we've had Fukushima, because we're unwilling to spend the resources to make it safe. Every nuclear power plant in the nation creates a host of spent fuel rods that are so toxic that were they to be unleashed, our groundwater could be poisoned for thousands of years. The military, in conjunction with the Department of Energy, found a solution for depleted uranium. So they created depleted uranium nose cones for missiles so that they could penetrate concrete installations and deep bunkers. And now tens of thousands of civilians in military theaters are suffering from the after effects of that radiation. The truth is, we just don't know what to do with those poisonous byproducts of our technology. I believe it was the ancient historian Josephus who first spoke of the lost continent of Atlantis. According to Edgar Cayce, someone I studied deeply, I read everything ever written by him or about him. He was the sleeping prophet who passed away in the last century, and it is said by the Association of Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach that 98.5% of all of his predictions were correct. He wrote that the Atlanteans created a great crystal. It was a huge crystal, open at both ends, with a number of facets inside it. Think of it as a laser on steroids that gathered and amplified the power of the sun and transmitted a very thick, wide tractor beam across their continent from one end to the other, such that aircraft, boats, land vehicles, and home appliances could merely point an antenna at the beam and receive all the energy they wished. Nikola Tesla successfully transmitted and received energy at his Colorado Springs laboratory shortly before the turn of the 20th century. It is reported that he pressed light bulbs into the soil and lit them remotely by transmitting wireless energy. And so Tesla must have been in psychic communication with the Akashic record of Atlantis. But the Atlanteans, who preceded Tesla by thousands of years, apparently misused their technology, much like we are misusing nuclear energy today and other technologies. And so the continent broke up in less than a day and sank into the sea. Great crystal, nuclear energy, same stuff, different day. Some believers in reincarnation, including many readers of the Edgar Cayce material and myself, believe that Silicon Valley represents the reincarnation of the Atlantean heritage, and that today's technological leaders shared an Atlantean existence in their past. If the legends are true, the Atlanteans failed to balance spirituality with technology and paid for their error with their lives. I believe we are on the same path. As our technology advances, our spirituality declines. Eastern theology suggests that we all try to live in the present moment. We are advised to meditate and to listen carefully for the voice of the cosmic consciousness. As suggested by Deepak Chopra, it's the voice that whispers to us in the gaps between our thoughts. But technology interrupts our attempt to live in the present moment. In the middle of your meditation, you are interrupted by the ringing of your baseline telephone, the musical tones of your cell phone, the chirping of your instant messaging system, or the beeping of your email system. We are electromagnetic beings attempting to live in a world of electromagnetic cacophony, and the noise is deafening to our souls, even though we cannot hear it with our ears. Many of us have a personal telephone with voicemail at home and another in the office with a different voicemail system. Some of us, notably youngsters, use cellular telephony for both home and office. And we also have Skype and instant messaging, and we have a business email box at the office and a personal email box at home. So every day we check multiple voicemail boxes and multiple email boxes, as well as numerous technologies from a score of other vendors. Between home phones, office phones, cell phones, pagers, email, voicemail, IM, internet telephony, radio, television, whether delivered by cable or satellite, we are literally bombarded by communication and by electromagnetic emanation. It's no wonder we have little time to reflect on who we are and what is our place in the universe. Our lives are a series of interruptions by unilateral communications. One party initiates the communication purely at their own convenience, and the other party is at the tether of that first party. I believe that unilateral communication is only worthwhile to the spirit when you're the one who is instituting that communication. When someone else is interrupting you, you are being dragged kicking and screaming out of your present moment and into theirs. We're the instant gratification generation. The moment we get the idea to speak to an old friend, it must be now, this minute, this second. It's a great thing for the initiator, but once again, it takes its toll on the recipient. Whether our cell phones are set to ring, vibrate, or stun, we've developed a startle response to incoming communication. Some people literally jump off the floor when their cell phone rings. We're living at the end of a communications tether, and we are jolted out of our train of thought every time somebody pulls on the leash. And we are multitasking as well. We speak to a friend on the phone while we are typing a response to an email from another friend. Has anybody here ever done that? We all have. And because the human brain can only process one thing at a time, very fast, trillionth of a second, with complete efficiency, both communications are imperfect and easily forgotten. In essence, we are cheating both of our friends of our undivided attention while we multitask. But as we compress more and more communication into our daily lives, we are at risk of becoming more and more, and we are, the slave of technology rather than its master. And so we've all seen people on their smartphones, 4 kids get together, they're sitting at a table having lunch, and every one of them is communicating with someone else on their smartphone. We are losing the art of face-to-face communication, and we are caught in this technology, which is so exciting and so magnetic. Those smartphones are just wonderful. You just can't leave them alone, and they are becoming our master. A friend of mine is a director at Cisco, and he's proud of the fact that he returns all of his communications within a few minutes. That's his raison d'etre. So because he made that commitment to the world at large, Roger takes calls when he's having lunch with a friend, which I think is kind of an insult, when he's on the golf course, when he's driving his car, and even when he's at a movie theater. We played a few holes of golf at a short course one day, and I shamed Roger into leaving his cell phone in the car. By the 3rd hole, he had developed cell phone anxiety and cell phone withdrawal. When we finished the round, he immediately checked his cell phone for voice messages, and it required a full 5 minutes for him to listen to all of them. What's interesting is that 2 callers called him several times within that 2-hour period. Why? Because they were used to getting instant gratification from Roger. He had educated them to expect that kind of response. So when he did not immediately return the phone calls, they assumed something was wrong and continued to reach out to him. And so Roger received 2 or 3 messages from the same people within a comparatively short period of time. If that isn't over-communication, I don't know what is. Is instant communication really that important? I was in the business world for almost a half a century, and it's hard to recall any instance in which it was absolutely, positively critical for someone to speak with me immediately. It's really difficult for me to remember anything that was so important to require that immediate response. It happens, but it's not very often. The truth is that barring medical emergencies, most things in life will wait till tomorrow. But because of the lure of technology, especially the smartphone technology, we're tethered to a device that provides instant gratification at the expense of a spiritual richness. Technology makes us feel guilty. I think guilty is a verdict in a jury trial, but it's a horrible emotion. And so I try to avoid guilt at all possible. But our inboxes are overflowing with paper, and we haven't had time to go through the pile, so we worry that something important is lurking there that we've overlooked. Our email boxes fill up daily, and we feel pressure to deal with them in a timely manner, lest we hurt the feelings of those who are reaching out to us. People at Sun Microsystems used to dread going on vacation because theirs was a total email culture. After a 7-day absence, a Sun employee would log on and find 1,500 messages in their voicemail box. We are so busy communicating and being responsive to our coworkers that we lack the time and mental state to really think strategically about what we are doing because we're so busy tactically communicating. EMC Corporation, the leading vendor of open system storage technology, a customer of mine, used to send an email to new employees, brand new employees in their first week, advising them to come to headquarters the next morning for an important meeting. And these new employees would be scattered all over the United States, so they'd all have to make airplane reservations and run down to the airport and try to get there by the next day. But they would then cancel that meeting by email 2 hours later and see who showed up. And the message that EMC was giving to its employees was, you better check your email boxes more often, because if you don't, you're going to break the email chain that we have developed in this company as our standard. So we're the immediate gratification generation. We are Homeric and heroic, the titans of modern technology, caught up in a whirlwind of instantaneous communication. But while we are giving the world access to our schedule, our time, and our lives, we are losing touch with our spiritual side. Because we are so busy living in every else's moment, we have little time to live in our own moment. Which brings us to an interesting concept. I had a situation with a friend of mine which caused me to develop this strategy. It's communicate with other people only when the value of each communicator's time is equal. That sounds strange? My friend John used to get into his car every 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, when he left work, and he lived in San Francisco. He worked in San Francisco and he lived in Foster City, which is where I live. And he would call me on his cell phone. And during his homeward commute, he would chat about whatever the heck he wanted to chat about. So I might be doing some very valuable work at my desk or spending quality time with my loved one. But every evening, Monday through Friday, whenever John left work, and that was variable, he'd interrupt my work to chat, and never about anything important. I gradually came to realize that I was John's evening commutation entertainment. He was calling me on his downtime or dead time when he had nothing better to do, but I was conversing him during my valuable time that I could otherwise have spent in the conduct of my business or furthering my relationship with my woman. So I finally told John that if he wanted to speak with me, he needed to call me after he arrived home. That way we would be both anteing up time of equal value. Strangely enough, though we remained friends after that conversation, John never again called me in the evening from his home. Oh, once in a while, but not on a regular basis. He had been quite agreeable to taking me away from my family while driving home during his downtime, but the moment John walked through his front door, he did not want to communicate to the outside world on his valuable time. So, interesting concept. Communicate with other people only when the value of communicators' time is equal. Most of us live lives of quiet desperation. We are much too busy to live our own lives joyfully, but we immediately respond to others to help them live their lives joyfully. But they don't either. They too are busy offering unlimited access to their lives, and so they don't have the time to find Deepak Chopra's gap between their thoughts. This begs the question, how do you live in the present moment when anyone in the world can jar you out of your moment and into theirs? Here are some suggestions. Camp on your phone calls, but know that the call will be an interruption, whether you choose to answer it or allow it to go to voicemail. Shut off your cell phone periodically, just to know the joy of taking your cell phone on leash, just to see if you can do it. We're like smartphone alcoholics. Put the glass down every once in a while, just to see if you can still survive without it. Believe me, the messages that you miss will not be important, because most of the communications aren't really important. Take a day off from email. Conduct triage on your email box and delete more of your messages without ever reading them. Stop allowing the world at large to contact you anytime they wish. Develop some rules and follow those rules, and give yourself some of your life back. For those who add you to their email distribution lists, send them a polite message asking that your name be deleted. Never write anything in an email that you would not want introduced as evidence in your trial. And never write something mean and nasty in an email, or it actually may outlive you. And lastly, stop and smell the flowers, or else your friends will be smelling them at the back of your hearse. So here's a suggestion from a CEO of a Silicon Valley company. Because what the issue is what is important? It's so difficult. Every communication coming out of us seems to have importance, but it really doesn't. So what we need to do is to decide what's really important and what isn't, and do triage. So here's a suggestion. I wrote a book years ago. I interviewed 150 Silicon Valley executives about what made them passionate in business. And this was one of my best interviews. It was with a head of an AI company that's no longer here. But he had a great idea. When your inbox is overflowing, there are 3 people standing outside your door waiting to talk to you. your email box is threatening to consume the remaining storage on your hard drive, and there's a stack of pink slip messages on your desk, try doing a look back from the future. Project your consciousness 3 years from now. Push it 3 years from now. Do a look back at today, and then try to decide what things were really important to that 3 year down the road future. And then throw the rest of those communications out and don't even spend any time on them. Remember, when you die, your inbox will probably be full. I had a near-death experience as a child and a second one as an adult, and I loved both of them. As a child, I was on an operating table for a simple tonsillectomy, which was the current fad in those days. All the doctors were making money by taking out tonsils. But I suffered a bacterial spray during the procedure, and I died. But it was only for a short time. My spirit popped out of my body. I was only 7 years old. And I popped out of my body like a cork, and I rose to the top of the ceiling, and I looked down upon the operating theater and listened to the doctors and nurses chatting during the surgery. And they looked so funny to me. I felt so peaceful, hovering on the ceiling, watching the drama with a detachment I only felt once more in my life. I really had no interest at all in going back to my body because I was as free as air. And then I felt myself being rubber banded back into my body as they started my heart again. And my moment of pure freedom came to an end. I only experienced that freedom one more time in my entire 76 years of living. It's very difficult to fear death once you've experienced the joy of escape from the prison of the body, or as John would say, from this confining spacesuit. I can't wait to die. Then I won't have to check email and voicemail anymore. But my only regret in this life is that when I die, someone afterward will wipe my hard drive. Thank you.